The importance of wild horses really changes based on who you speak with. There's quite a lot of history in the entire West of horses actually being wrangled up and then sold off. Other people find them an integral part of the ecosystem, and so they would like to see wild horses in that stance. And then other people further, like wild horses and horses in general, have helped shape the West, both for indigenous peoples and for those colonial westward movements. And so from that standpoint, they're a historical resource that should be preserved and kept around. Today, we took a group of 10 students from the University of Utah out to the West Desert to observe the Onaqui wild horses. And our goal for today was to give people a chance to observe the wild horses with their own eyes and be able to actually get an idea of how horses behave on any given day-to-day as opposed to what they've been told in books and journal articles, etc. I wanted them to get an idea of how much are horses resting, how much are horses grazing. When they see those behaviors, rather than just assigning something to them, like this is what's happening, kind of consider what are the other horses doing around them and what function is that providing for the horse. And then you can actually make a good interpretation on what that behavior might do on an evolutionary scale. We do a lot of different types of citizen science. I would say for today, we're mostly getting people introduced to how scientific studies might operate so that they can do a better job of basically understanding a science paper, or if they want to get involved in a study near them, they would have some idea of how that might look. One of the primary things that we do as the catalog and one of our big mission statements is that we have so many photographers that come and watch these horses and observe, and that allows us to basically get observations from a huge variety of people at many, many times. And so it's a big, big benefit to understanding how these horses function and on a very close to all day long, everyday scale, which may be more difficult to achieve with other methods. We're a catalog of horses, right? So we need to ID them. And we actually have a series of steps that we follow to help determine what horses are who. And our biggest thing is we get context first. So we have basically taken the range and said, here are the geographic regions where different groups of horses tend to want to be. Is it in the north or south herd or the east herd? And we'll just circle one, and then we've got a list of horses that are in that region, right? And then from that point, we want to find the color. So, is it a roan? Is it a bay? Is it a gray horse, which typically ranges in colors and can be quite tricky. And then once we have that, we want to determine is it male or female. And then we can further go on to there's white markings that each horse have, like on their face or on their legs, and we can use those white markings and how far up they go and what shape they are to help narrow it down further. Now at that point, we're usually good. Usually we can identify the horse, but there are some horses out there that are a solid color, or even horses that change a little color a little bit depending on what their genetic background is. And so at that point, what we'll do is we'll actually look at the horse's head, and they have hair which goes in different directions. And just like human beings have a point where the hair meets and goes in different directions, right? Horses have one on their head as well. And so based on where that lines up on the horse, we can actually match it to the correct horse because that stays the same as they age. And so that's like a fingerprint for them. It's always consistent. Anytime we see a horse we don't recognize, we have to take a picture from all angles, and usually also in summer and winter. And if you've got any horses that change colors, you need to take continuous photos throughout their lives to make sure you have an updated database. People can actually go to our website, Onaqui Catalogue Foundation. They can take their pictures, they can take the GPS coordinate, they can take their observation, and they can submit it. And then what we can do is we can start compiling that, not only to give back to the public so they have a greater understanding, but hopefully in the future to kind of create data sheets and be able to present those to any scientists that might want to access them for any studies they're working on. And in the future, we would very much like to expand that further to talk to scientists at universities and say, what sort of thing are you interested in studying right now? Can you utilize our database to do that? Or can we make basically a community product among our visitors that they can actually go out and collect data for you and then help make studies happen faster with less cost to those universities? So the inspiration for the class itself, that was actually board treasurer Teresa. And we talked a lot about the fact that people would come to our social media pages, right? Or ask us questions. They wanted to go out to the range, they wanted to see things, they didn't know where to go. And they really didn't, they wanted to understand horse behavior more. And there wasn't really a good place to access that. And in addition, a lot of the information out there was in conflict with what I'd been learning as in some of my behavioral science classes. And so Teresa decided to reach out to continuing education at the U and ask if they'd be interested in having a course out here. And they were quite supportive, and so then we just kind of laid down the groundwork. You know, how long do we want it to be? How much information can we cover? Because there's so much more we could cover. And we came up with this format of having a 2-hour lecture to kind of get people introduced to the ideas and really start to understand where management fits in. And then to actually be able to come out to the horses and see them with their eyes and see the range and start to apply some of the things they learned in class to a real-world situation. If you are someone who starts to get involved in wild horses, you start to realize that there's a bunch of interplay in how wild horses interact with their ecosystem, but also with the socio-political landscape. And there's a lot of information that gets pushed around by many, many different people, and it's often very hard to kind of take apart that and understand the context in which those things are often said. And so by bringing people out here to where things are actually happening, we can talk with them, we can answer their questions, and we can try and give them all of the data and all the information that we know so that they can start to make decisions on their own, and they can start to interact with both their local governments and any local organizations and also federal governments to kind of achieve goals that they feel are best for how the wild horses interact with our public lands and our public ecosystems.